Zadonde, Electro Ninja here, and welcome back to Electro Ninja's Lab. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the latest chapter of My Hero Academia. And I might have been wrong. Kind of. Let me actually explain a little bit better. One of the things that I said, keep in mind that I did say that these quirks were similar. I didn't and the fact that number 2 has a different quirk is not or number 4 has a different quirk than what I said is not necessarily disproving my point. It more than likely is just saying that maybe the size manipulation quirk might not be in there. There's a lot to it, and I'm actually uncertain right now, but I still think that my theory is somewhat accurate. But anyways, let's actually talk about this chapter. Chapter 308 of My Hero Academia. This is pretty much just a bit of a fight. Mostly not even really a full fight. Basically, Deku has just saved Yo and is trying to evade attacks from Muscular, while also calculating a lot of things. We also get to find out what the sixth user? Yes, the sixth user's quirk is. Holy crap, that is actually... yeah, that was actually way more of a challenge to remember which one he was. But we find out that his quirk is not size manipulation like I was assuming, but rather is smokescreen. Now, let me explain why my theory could still be accurate. Deku's quirks could still be connected and all of that jazz, but it's not necessarily disproven. It's also possible that Horikoshi somehow saw this and was like, holy shit, he's gonna get them all before it even happens, and he's just like, okay, we're going in this direction now. We're going to change some of these quirks, such as the one that was originally going to get size manipulation no longer does, and the water-based quirk is no longer going to. I kind of doubt that that's actually a thing, but it would be kind of interesting. But here's why I still think that there is still the possibility that size manipulation and the restoration quirk are still in there, with those being actually the second and third users' quirks. Now, why exactly would I say that smokescreen is not actually disproving the theory? Well, it's actually because of the fact that smokescreen could actually be water-based. Unfortunately, we're not really able to tell just by what it is, but due to the fact that the coloring scheme for this actual chapter makes the smokescreen to be more white than being darker, actually signifies to me that this is a white-ish smokescreen. It is not a dark smokescreen, it is a lighter smokescreen, which, believe it or not, even though it is possible, for the most part, if you're going to have a darker smokescreen, that's going to be more fire-based, and so on and so forth. But in this case, since it's lighter, and possibly... the thing is, like I said, it's black and white, so we can't tell for certain, but the fact is that it could be converting water molecules in the air to actually change them into smoke. Basically fog. Even though they're calling it smokescreen, it's not necessarily a smoke effect. It's actually a fog effect, which could work. I'm not saying that it's 100% accurate, but it's definitely a possibility. And I know that I am quite possibly just jumping through hoops trying to connect dots, but yeah. That's like the biggest thing, though. in this chapter. Pretty much the fight is just really boring in all aspects, because basically all we get to see is Deku getting Yo to safety, and then continuing his fight while mostly evading attacks from Muscular, but also saying that he's not going to let any more buildings get damaged. It's actually a really interesting thing that he's actually using a lot of these quirks a lot more effectively than I was expecting, especially early on. And it's also really interesting to see that a lot of these users are basically telling him, hey, these quirks should be seen less as, hey, you need to use this in full combat. It's more, these are tools to help you use your skills even better. So basically, Deku's main power that he's going to be using moving forward is still going to be the super strength, but he can use other things like Black Whip to contain people, but he can also use it as basically rope for a lot of different options. His Spidey sense, I'm going to continue to call it that. I am not calling it a danger sense, but his Spidey sense is basically just, hey, here's an attack coming from this direction. Whoop, whoop, get out of the way. And Smokescreen is basically to allow him to escape without anyone noticing him. And, I mean, honestly, Float is not that big of a deal. Float is honestly just such a... It's basically to allow him to maneuver easier, and that's it. Honestly, I kind of wish that we had gotten to see a little bit more, but this is actually showing Deku at basically his most powerful. He can go toe-to-toe with Muscular now, without necessarily having to worry as much. He can continue to avoid the attacks without really having any real issues. And honestly, it's kind of crazy that he has grown so much. And it's not just the fact that he's more powerful. He's different. He's a very different person than the person that he used to be. He's grown from the boy that first fought Muscular to now being a new hero. A hero who can save people. A hero who, unfortunately, is kind of having to stay to the shadows, but it's honestly still a really interesting moment, to say the least. And, Muscular is kind of annoyed at him because of the fact that he's using all of these bizarre tactics instead of just going all out. But Deku retorts to him, this is also my full power, or is it true power? It's full power. So yeah, this is also my full power, as basically he is wiping the floor with Muscular. Now, I'm not saying that 100% this battle is over, but it could very easily be over at this point, with him taking down Muscular without really breaking a sweat. He's a much better and more skilled hero at this point. But now comes the question, what are the other two quirks? At this point, we've now seen every single quirk that there is, except for the first two. Now, obviously, like I said in the past, I would like to see that one of them ends up being a size manipulation quirk and one happens to be a healing quirk that basically allows Deku to go full ham without hurting himself, while also causing him to regain his lost quirk, which, need I remind you that Deku does actually have a quirk himself. It's just been lost because of, well, you know. I mean, come on. He thinks he's Sly. He's not Sly. Oh my gosh. Horikoshi thinks he's Sly and keeping this a secret, but in all honesty, he has never kept a really big secret, really. I mean, let's take a second to recall. He thought he kind of made it out that Toya was a twist. Basically, Dabi being Toya was a twist that no one was expecting. But the simple fact of the matter is that the second that that Dabi was introduced, people were like, "Oh, he's Todoroki's brother." There were so many hints, and it just kept getting more and more as we got to see more about Dabi. So the fact that he's Toya does not surprise a single person. But the fact is that since basically since we found out that the doctor was, well, the doctor that tested Deku, yeah, there's been no hint that Deku, there has been tons of hints that Deku has a quirk. And honestly, something felt off about that whole explanation to a lot of people way back when. So like I said, one of these two quirks has to be a restoration quirk. A quirk that allows Deku to heal himself and possibly regain this quirk. I mean, honestly, I really don't want it to be something where he finally kills All For One, and when he does, everyone whose quirks were stolen from them are restored. That honestly just sounds so boring, but I mean, I could see it as basically being a possibility. I kind of doubt that it is going to be the possibility, but it's definitely a possibility. I mean, obviously, those who have died since they've lost their quirks, they're not going to regain them or anything, but basically, their descendants, if they're still quirkless, will regain their quirks or whatever, is probably the more likely situation. I'm not 100% certain, but basically anyone who's recently lost their quirks will regain their quirks. That's a possibility. And more than likely, it's going to be really interesting. And as for the other user, I still can't shake the feeling that something has to do with size manipulation. To some degree. I don't know exactly what it would be, but it does have to have something to do with it. I'm no longer certain that it has something to do with he can get smaller or he can get taller, but it just clicks in my brain, especially after that little moment in the manga. I actually want to show you guys this page, but when Deku is it's explained to him, he should think of these quirks as basically extensions of his body. We get, or basically new equipment that he gets to use. We get to see this little picture, which shows him 1 with a jetpack, 2 with a rope, a communicator, the little fog thing, and then a shadow? That's honestly a bit interesting. I'm not 100% certain if that's actually if that's supposed to be a shadow or if that's supposed to be a or just supposed to be his other leg, because it's clear that his that he's got one leg up in front of the picture, but we can't see the other one. But I just can't imagine that he's got both legs outstretched towards him when he's got his arms in a different position. Seriously, having both legs out in front while you are kind of looking like this, that's a really dangerous thing to do. So, I don't know. Usually, if you're going to be jumping forward with everything, you're going to have both your hands forward and both of your legs forward, not both legs forward and one hand forward and one hand back. Just saying. So, yeah, I kind of doubt that that's actually his leg, but yeah, so I don't know, there's still something in there that I want to look into, but I can't really put my finger on it quite yet. So what exactly could this quirk be, if not actually size manipulation, where he can actually grow to an insane height? or go to a small height, maybe it's something a little bit more different. Rather than a transformation quirk, maybe it is still an emitter quirk. We've actually been... It's kind of been said that all of these quirks are emitter quirks rather than transformation or mutation quirks that are within Deku's actual power set. Which would actually make sense, because transforming into a giant monster, into a giant person, or into a small person, that would be a transformation quirk. So what if, perhaps, instead he has an emitter quirk that allows him to extend a shadow out of himself? I mean, obviously it would be stupidly similar to another quirk that we all know and love, but it's definitely a possibility. Basically, he could extend it so that it can go into small places, or he can actually use it to fight bigger things, like if he eventually had to face off against Gigantomachia. He could use that as basically his defense, while also doing something else. I don't know. It just feels odd. And the worst part is that we still haven't really... Even in this picture, it doesn't really look like there's any specific things that could be connected. So I'm not 100% certain. But then something else comes to mind. Many people have actually pointed out this point every time that we've seen the second user. I'm not certain if it's the second user or the third user, but basically he has huge gauntlets that look very similar to Bakugo's, and many people have gone to that conclusion that maybe it's Bakugo from the future, or so on and so forth, that there's and basically Bakugo went back in time and all of this. I still don't think that that's true. I think that that is more than likely just something that has to do with something else. Maybe, since this user is from a time when quirks were actually basically considered useless, barely doing much else, perhaps when he wanted to become a hero and help people out, more than likely during the Vigilante era, just saying, maybe these were actually used as weapons to basically help him to fight off against bigger villains that he couldn't do by himself. It's definitely a possibility that I think many fans would actually really enjoy to see how exactly that plays out moving forward in the story. So, yeah. And considering the fact that that he would probably be the most likely to have the healing quirk, I'm just saying that would make a lot more sense than it probably should. But yeah, size manipulation and healing quirk makes sense. Now, obviously, do I still think that Deku is going to be gaining his old original quirk again? Absolutely. The fact is that I can't see Deku going into that final fight against All For One without having his full arsenal. And when I say his full arsenal, I mean that he is able to unleash 100% at a constant level. He is able to use Float as well as Black Whip, Danger Sense, Smoke Bomb, or Smoke Screen, all of those quirks, all of the quirks that he has now in his arsenal, all simultaneously. And I can't imagine him not being able to use that fire manipulation quirk that would come from the combination of both his mother and father. So, I don't know. On top of that, I really do want to see the final fight be something where Deku can't do it alone. One of the things that we've seen recently is obviously the picture behind me, where Deku and Uraraka are falling down into the city. I actually think that this is one of the last moments, but in all honesty, I think that this is actually a much bigger picture than we thought. This is a focused image on Uraraka and Deku, but in all honesty, there is actually a much broader picture where everyone else is up there with them. Uraraka is crying, telling Deku that he shouldn't have gone off on his own, but in actuality, the entire group is there. ready to fight alongside Deku to finally take down these villains once and for all. Bakugo blasting off huge explosions. Mineta just throwing all of his sticky balls to cause chaos. Sero and Soji and everyone. Sue. All of them working together. Those who have formed huge, big relationships, working in teams to cause a avalanche, basically, to stop these big villains. The ones that need to be stopped more than anything. Obviously, we know that there are certain big villains that need to be dealt with, and villains that we haven't seen their full power yet. There is a very big hint at a lot of people who are able to use their quirks. Not to mention that we still need to deal with all of those Nomu that escaped with Shigaraki. So, yeah, needless to say, I do think that this arc is going to be going heavy into the whole situation and deciding basically how exactly is Deku going to gain his new quirks, and maybe little by little him realizing more and more he doesn't have to do this alone. And finally, for that final battle, everyone joins in for that final battle to work together to save the world against this menace who's been terrorizing them forever. But anyways, guys, that's what I think is going to happen. And I know this video was mostly theory rather than actually talking about this chapter, but in all honesty, that's kind of what needed to happen. There's so much theory fodder in this chapter, but so little action, it's kind of insane. In all honesty, this chapter just exemplifies how much Deku has grown over the past year. So, yeah, needless to say, I'm excited. But anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please make sure to leave a like, leave your thoughts and theories down in the comments below. If you are going to leave a theory, make sure to say theory review somewhere in your comment so that we can talk about it in a future video. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, whether you're new or if you just haven't subscribed yet, because only about 30% of the people who watch these videos are actually subscribed. So, like I said, please subscribe. And of course, if you do want to support the channel even more, then definitely head down to the description and check out all of our links down there, including our social medias, our other channels, and ways you can support us financially, including our merch store, our book, and the Patreon. And also a big thank you to our current patron, Sheeny. But anyways, guys, I have been Electro Ninja, and I will see you guys next time. But on!